We'll start in just a moment. All right. Hello. Welcome. Okay. All right. Okay. Just a moment. Everything's set up here. The technologies. Um, almost there. And there. Baruch Hashem. All right. Hello. Welcome. Good evening. All right. It's nice to see people showing up.
Hello.
Welcome
Good
to.
evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Evening.
All right. So we are learning the parsha, parshiot today. It's a double parsha, Tazria, Metzora, and we're going to learn tonight in the merit of a refuah shalema for a young lady I just heard about today, who's the very progressed state of Yena Machla and cancer, liver, and she's a young mother of two children. And her name is Irina Bas Lena. Refuah Shalema. The learning of Torah should be a merit for her and for her family. Should only hear good things. We're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to spend a little more time on the nutshell of the parsha and the summary of the parsha. We'll see in a moment why. The quick overview of the entire parsha is that in this parsha we learn about, aside from the tuma aspect that we learn about in the beginning, that has to do with, but we learned about different kinds of tumas, about what's usually translated as impurity, and the first tuma that we learn about is the impurity of childbirth, actually. Now, it's an unusual tuma because we know, well, usually when we talk about impurity, we're talking about something to do with death, something disgusting, something impure, right? For lack of a better word. And childbirth should be the opposite. It's this joyous occasion. It's wonderful. It's miraculous. There's a country song says, "I saw God today," when in reference to seeing a birth. It's an amazing thing. So what's the tuma involved? So it's a funny thing that not funny really, but it's sort of a sad fact of life. Like Benjamin Franklin said, one of the definites of life is death. Right. So when you have a child, although that is the essence of life, bringing life into the world, you're also long term, you're bringing death into the world too. I mean, of course, that child could have more children, et cetera, et cetera. But eventually, the way of the world is after 120 years, everybody leaves. So that's the tuma that the new mother has to be considerate of when she brings a korban. That's what the parsha begins with. That's why it's called Tazria, from the word zera, from the word seed, and that's how the parsha begins. With the parsha, the vast majority of the parsha talks about the laws and the details of how to find out who has tzaraat. And tzaraat is an interesting disease. We'll talk in some detail about that. Of course, it's been translated variously as leprosy or other diseases, and whether it is leprosy or some other disease that we don't have a name for anymore, we're just going to call it tzaraat for purposes of this class, okay? The so that brings me to what we're going, and then the next parsha mostly deals with also tzaraat and getting rid of it. In other words, what the process was, the ceremony that the teruah had to do to become a Metzora, to be somebody who doesn't have tzaraat anymore. To do that, there's all kinds of things the person had to bring, korban, a sacrifice, and of course wait a certain amount of time. We'll get to all that when we get to the next parsha. One of the things, then the parsha, very interestingly, talks about a third kind of tzaraat, the tzaraat of a house. So, although the tzaraat of the body is what the parsha begins with, tzaraat of the clothing, and Tazria ends. The Metzora is the parsha that deals with tzaraat of the house. After it talks about the ceremony to get rid of tzaraat. Interesting thing. I don't know if we'll be discussing that in greater detail today, but maybe for a future time. And then the end of the parsha talks about other kinds of tuma, other kinds of impurity, which would cause somebody to not be worthy anymore of being in the Jewish camp. So that's why I wanted to start off with this interesting overview. If I could, I guess I have to do that. So I'm sharing the screen. So I did a Google search for Tazria flowchart, and it brought me to chinuch.org, which is an organization that I've gotten materials from for a long time. A lot of good teaching materials there. Ooh, that's unusual. We don't need that right now. Please. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so and a rabbi by the name of Gedalia Goldstein, no relation to my Gedalia, should be weird, had a certain thing that he called the Tazria flow chart, which is exactly what I was looking for. In other words, I happen to know that a few commentaries, besides dealing with the parsha in the actual parsha, have sort of, there's a big hurry, I guess.
He wants to come to class.
I guess so. Be jumping in their motorcycle helmet any second. All right, so the Tazria flowchart, so the Torah Tamima in the beginning, very unusually, the Torah Tamima basically has a very in-depth commentary. It quotes from the Talmud to back up sayings of Chazal from the Torah. And all of a sudden, the Torah Tamima in the very beginning of Tazria has a whole introduction, has a whole thick paragraph, very unusual. And then at the end of Tazria in Rav Hirsch, he has also a long piece, longer than usual, and completely separate from any particular verse. It's a whole like essay, basically, on the Tazria and the Metzora process. So I thought this little flow chart would be very helpful for us, just to go through the different steps. This is according to, let's say, Rashi and the majority of commentaries to say that the first step is actually at the end of the parsha, at the end of Metzora. The first step, if somebody deserves tzaraat, and the Gemara in Arachim talks about different reasons why somebody would deserve tzaraat. The most famous reason that we always say is lashon hara, but that's not the only thing. There's being stingy is a reason to get tzaraat. All kinds of other reasons for getting this disease. But according to Rashi, and like I said, most other commentaries, the tzaraat first attacks a person in their house or on their house, to be more specific. So step one here, a green or red spot is found on a house. The kohen says, Tameh, the house is locked up for 1 week. That's the first step. Nothing else is done. After 1 week, if the spot disappeared or got lighter, tahor, no problem. Just some sort of discoloration. Somebody came by with some spray paint and now it's gone. Cool. However, if it stayed the same, then the kohen doesn't know yet what to do. So he says, wait another week. So then we get to the second week. If that spot got bigger, now we have really probably real tzaraat. And what we do at this point is the kohen says to remove the bricks of the house that have the tzaraat on them, replace them with new bricks, and lock this person up, lock up this house for another 2 weeks. Or sorry, for another week, second week, right? Now we go into 2 weeks. So again, if that spot disappeared, we're not even here anymore, right? Everything's fine. Everything's back to normal. We're going back to work. No problem. If that tzaraat stayed the same, now this in the second week, if the spot disappeared or got lighter, back to being tahor, no problems, right? If it stayed the same a second week, now we do the same step that we did before. We take out the bricks, we replace it with new bricks, and now we lock up the house for a third week. If the spot got bigger, the house has to be destroyed. In other words, the person is not learning the lesson of the tzaraat. The person's house needs to be completely destroyed, dismantled. If on that second week, there's now no spot, when that spot earlier had gotten bigger, now there's no spot at all, tahor, pure, no problem. If the spot returned, now remember we took out the bricks, and now the spot returned, the house is destroyed again. That again, but this house is destroyed. Next, the third week. If after the third week, right, and the spot has stayed the same and stayed the same, nothing changed, and now there's no spot, tahor. That's the easy, by the way, that's the easiest. As soon as there's no spot anymore, it's tahor, it's pure. If the spot returns after we, again, took out the bricks, replace it with new bricks, lock up the house for a week, if the spot returns, that's not normal. That's already tzaraat, and the house is destroyed. That's stage one. Stage two, a green or red spot is found on clothing. The kohen says tameh. The clothing is locked up for 1 week. By the way, green and red are the bad colors. Like nice. Green and red. Christmas colors. All right. I think this person's lost. They don't know where the class is. All right. So now the kohen says that the clothing is tameh. The clothing is locked up for 1 week. After a week, if the spot stayed the same, then you wash the clothing in 7 different types of cleaners. And then if the cleaning got rid of the spot, then it's tahor. Obviously, one of these detergents worked. It was probably the Tide with the HE, whatever. No, I'm kidding. I'm not advertising any clean. Although this would be a great opportunity if you have a company that makes detergents. This would be a great opportunity to sponsor a class. If the clothing did not get rid of the spot after the 7 different cleanings, then you have to lock up the clothing for a second week. If the spot got bigger after that first week, by the way, after the 1 week of being locked up, then the clothing is burned. It cannot be saved. After 2 weeks, though, if the spot got lighter, in other words, the material with the spot is then removed, the hole is patched up, and then if there's no spot after that, then it's tahor. If the spot returns, the clothing is burned. However, if the spot stayed the same after it was already cleaned and it did not get rid of the spot, and a week later the spot is still the same, then that clothing is burned. Okay, that was step 2. Step 3, last but not least, a white spot is found on the skin. Okay, the white spot does not have 2 white hairs in it, then the person is locked up for 1 week. If that white spot has 2 white hairs in it, the kohen says tameh. The Metzora must go outside all walled cities of Eretz Yisrael until his or her tzaraat goes away. The kohen says tahor, and he or she tovels him or herself and his or her clothing in a mikvah. So all that has to be done if that white spot has 2 white hairs in it. But then we also said, right, if the spot does not have the 2 white hairs, the person is locked up for a week. So what happens after that week? Good question. If the spot stayed the same, the person is locked up for a second week. If the 2 hairs turned white or the spot got bigger, the kohen says tameh. The Metzora then goes through this same exact process, going outside of the walled cities. The kohen has to say tahor before the person is actually tahor. and then the person has to go into the mikvah. Okay. The person has to go and put himself and all of his clothing into the mikvah or her clothing. Right. After 2 weeks, remember the spot stayed the same. The person was locked up for a week. So now what happens after 2 weeks? If the spot still stayed the same, the kohen says tahor. There's just some sort of weird discoloration in your skin. You're pure. And then the person goes into the mikvah with his clothing as well. Not wearing the clothing. Okay. If the two hairs turned white or the spot got bigger, then again the kohen says tameh. The person has to go outside the walled cities. The kohen has to say tahor again, and then the person goes into the mikvah with, and then also takes the clothing as well. All right, so that's the parsha in a nutshell. That's a pretty good summary. I was very impressed. I can't think offhand that he's missing, so we're gonna go with that. So we're gonna, like I said, we're doing something different. We're sort of going out of order here, and now we're gonna go back into the parsha, deep dive into the parsha with the pasuk in chapter 12, verse 12 of Leviticus. This has nothing to do with tzaraat, but is a very important lesson as well. So it says, "Daber el bnei Israel," this is Hashem speaking to Moshe to tell the Jewish people, Lamor, saying, "Isha ki Tazria v'yalda zachar." If a woman develops seed and into a child, and it's a male, v'tama shivat yamim, she is tameh, she's impure for 7 days. Kimei nidat avodah titmah. She's unclean, just like she was when she was a nidah. Right, and when a woman menstruates, she is tameh, she is impure until she goes to the mikvah. A monthly occurrence for most people. Now, there's a lot to say on this, but let's start with the chidah, because that's going to give you a sneak peek into our next series of classes that we're doing Monday nights. Yes, we're doing Ascent to Harmony, but every once in a while we take a break, and we're going to take a break next week to talk about another very important issue that near and dear to my heart, that is becoming more and more relevant, and I hope it will encourage you to tell your friends to come to the class as well. The Chidah in the Chomat Anoch writes that ki Tazria v'yalda zachar, that when a woman has a child and it's zachar, he says it's the Rosh Tevot. If you look at the first letter of each word, a chaf, a taf, a vav, and a zayin are mixed up, are the Rosh Tevot, the basically the acronym for the word zechut, for merit. Why? The tzidkat habanim al harov taloi be'isha. The tzidkut, the righteousness of your child, is mostly dependent on the merits of the mother, of the isha. It is a woman's God-given ability to have children and to raise children that allows a child to become righteous and to be taught to be righteous. It doesn't mean that's always the case. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule. I don't know what kind of a tzedeket Esther's mother was, but Mordechai probably taught her a thing or two about how to be a tzaddik. In her case, it's tzedeket. So obviously, the upbringing of the child is very much dependent on both parents, but there are certain zechuyot, merits, that only a mother can give spiritually to her children, usually. Why is this? How is this a hint to our next upcoming class? I'm glad you asked. Our next class in our series of Know What to Answer, the Know What to Answer series, I'm calling it, is going to be about Kol Isha, the various laws, prohibitions, and ideas behind the idea of women not singing in front of men. I know it's a controversial issue, especially since the 60s and 70s. Jewish feminists, in particular, have taken Torah institutions to task about this, to explain it, and we'll do our best to explain it best I can. This is not, will hopefully not be a muted class. So if you have ideas to add or to interject with, I'd be very happy to hear. We have some also new sources we're going to be using besides the usual halachic sources, Shulchan Aruch, the Gemara, and everything else. We'll also have a very interesting new article that was published just this week in Glamour magazine, of all places, written by a very good writer that I've been following on Twitter for quite a while. I'm very impressed with her work, and it's a very nice article about Kol Isha. Okay, so that's all a plug for the next Monday's class. Tell your friends, and come also. So, but there are some other ideas I'd like to share with you on this particular pasuk, and one comes from Rav Shach. So Rav Shach, Rav Elazar Menachem Man Shach, Zecher Tzedek Uvracha. The yahrzeit is not anytime soon. It's in the 16th of Cheshvan. Happens to be my birthday, so I remember it quite well. Don't be too impressed with my memory here. It's my birthday, for goodness sake. So the Rav Shach in Machshevet. What?
Was it your birthday?
Oh, not today. No, sorry. No, the Rav Shach's yahrzeit is my birthday, 16th of Cheshvan. Not my birthday today, not at all. It's closer to my half birthday, actually. So back to, actually exactly, wow, almost exactly. Next week, okay, if there's such a thing as a half birthday. I don't even celebrate my birthday, so don't worry about it. I just like pies from my kids. If they're listening, if they're out there somewhere in the stratosphere. All right, so Rav Shach points out that the world, as it's created, is usually divided into four parts: the inanimate, those things that grow, and then the inanimate are things that don't grow, like rocks. The animate, those would be like the things that do grow, like plants, right, vegetation. And things which are alive, those would be like animals, creatures, things with what's literally called animus. It moves, tries to survive, fights for survival, etc., etc. And then there's the human, all right? That which speaks, the having the ability to speak, right? So based on a midrash in Vayikra Rabbah, I'm gonna try to summarize this as best I can. There are he says he nira ma melamed otanu Torah, that which the Torah taught, ma hi notenet lanu, echi mitchayeches le'adam be'eze or hi me'era oto ve'umat zeh. So zeh umat derech. No, that's not what I wanted to quote. Hold on a second. Here we go. Next line. Yisod ha'yisodotu. The main point. Everything was created before man. Correct? Man was created on the 6th day of creation. So everything was created before man. First through 5th day. Right? And yet we're supposed to say that the whole world was made for me. As it says in the Chazal, Adam Harishon, when Hashem created Adam Harishon, showed him all the trees of Gan Eden, etc., etc. And I made the whole world, says, just for you to take care of. Chayev Adam Lomar Bishvili Nivraha Olam. Every person is obligated to say that the whole world was made just for me. That you sowed Hashem Baruch Amar La Adam Harishon. This is what Hashem taught, the secret that Hashem taught to Adam Harishon. The Gemara, so goes to Gemara, almost at the end of Brachot 58a, that so to say that, so the question becomes, is saying that the whole world was made for me, is that an issue of gava? Is that an issue of being full of yourself? Lack of humility. So you might think, he goes on to say, you might think that this ability to speak, right, that humans have, this unique thing, is just our one unique thing. You know, all animals have some sort of a unique thing. You know, a lion is brave, a fox is sly, you know, a panda bear is cute, whatever. But a human being, fox, that's our little trick. Every animal has its own little trick. Just a human being is just another kind of animal with another kind of trick. Was it that David Letterman used to have on his show, Dumb Pet Tricks or something like that? We speak. David Letterman because he speaks. All right, so just another dumb animal. So that's why it says in Bereshit that he breathed into the nostrils and into Adam Harishon. Hashem breathed in life, which means he didn't just breathe life into him; he breathed himself into him. Now, obviously, Hashem has no physical self. So what it means is Hashem instilled into man a soul. We're not just speaking animals. We're not just animals with a trick. We have a spirit. We have a soul. As opposed to the philosophy that says that man was created for the world. In other words, it's man's responsibility to develop nature and improve upon all the elements within it. The result of this kind of thinking is that man finds himself trapped in a vicious cycle. He has to contribute by adding to it. And at the same time, he only gets satisfaction by taking from it. So that makes man no different than an animal, says Rav Shach. But that's not the Torah perspective. The Torah perspective believes that every Jew who has elevated himself or herself, and as it says in Tehillim, you have appointed him as ruler over the works of your hand. You have put all things at his feet. We have the ability, our mental ability and our spiritual ability to recognize our purpose and become happier about it. The happiness that a Jewish person can feel by following the Torah is what he's writing about here. This whole idea of being a Balei Chaim, just being a living thing. We're not just a living thing that has a trick that we can talk, and that passes the time. You know, we'll just stand around the water cooler and chat. That's not what human beings have the potential to do alone. We also have the potential to do great things and to grow spiritually, and that's what we were put in this world for. And that's what this essay says. I'll let you read that on your own when you have a moment. We have a good. We're about halfway through the class. We have plenty of time to discuss some of these other issues as well. Okay, so let's get right into how a kohen knows that somebody has tzaraat. Says we already discussed the actual flowchart of what the kohen is looking for: a red spot, white spot, red and green. Okay, we talked about that. So in the skin of a person, it's a white spot, right? So it's a nega, which is just means a discoloration or affected part of the skin. the kohen sees this nega in the skin of the flesh, v'seyar v'nega hafach lavan umare hanega amok meor b'saro nega tzaratu. So he sees the skin on the flesh, and if there's a hair in the area that's turned white and it appears to be deeper than the skin of the body, then it is indeed tzaraat. And the kohen sees it, and he declares the person tummy, impure. Great. Only one problem. Meshech Chochmah points out, we said the verb twice. The kohen saw, and then yada, 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 the kohen saw. Sounds a little redundant, right? So what does the Meshech Chochmah say? Meshech Chochmah says, "V'ra kohen et nega chule, v'ra'ahu kohen." He says it twice. B'kfelot mevor. This needs explanation. V'ayim b'Torah kohanim. So he directs us to the midrash in Torah kohanim, and he says in the end that the shahakavana shira et hanega im hi rui litamana. So first he looks at the nega to see if it's actually diseased. Does this person have tzaraat? Ushiesh siman tumas ar lavan. He's looking for this white hair. There's the siman, the symbol of tuma, of this impurity. So he's looking for that. V'ra'ahu kohen hu shira kohen kol ha'ish imrui l'tamato. And then the kohen looks at a person. He's not just looking at this symbol of impurity. Now he's looking at the person. Not to do with the disease, but more like, let's look at this person. Let's look at this person's circumstances. Uim chatan notnim lo kol zayin yemei hamishta. The Gemara says that if he's a chatan, if he just got engaged, he gets 7 days of Sheva brachot. You don't have to tell the person, the kohen doesn't tell the person that he has tzaraat, ruin his life right in the beginning of his marriage, right? In other words, the psak, the final decision about what this person needs to do, depends entirely on who this person is and what this person's circumstances are. And that's how, by the way, aside from tzaraat and the kohen, that's how a posek works. That's how psak halacha is brought down. Torah is not just, you have to do such and such and such and such, and then I can create you a flow chart for the entire Torah, and then the results are such and such and such and such. Each person is different. Each person gets judged differently. And Hashem knows our background better than anybody. And Hashem judges us perfectly. He knows exactly kechut hasara, like a hair's breadth. He knows exactly what we're deserving and what we need to get and what we need to do to receive that. Meshech Chochmah's idea here is very insightful. It's very insightful, very important for most of us to know. And that is, when we make decisions, if a posek does this, how much more so do we need to be careful about how we make decisions also? We need to look at the whole situation, not just is it A, B, and C, but who is this person? How is this going to affect things? We have the classic story. I think I must have told before, but when Rav Chaim Brisker was confronted by somebody who asked if he can use the 4 cups for the Seder night, if he can use milk. What did Rav Chaim Brisker do? He gave him a lot of money. Instead of answering the question, He gave him a lot of money. Now, the answer, by the way, the halachic answer, if you come up to me and ask, can I use milk for my cups of wine? The answer is no, of course not. It has to be wine. You might get away with grape juice under a lot of certain circumstances. You're not used to wine, or it's not healthy for you. For sure, grape juice is acceptable. It's hagafen.
Also, aren't you eating meat?
So that was the famous story. So what does Rav Chaim Britzker do? He gives him a lot of money. When his wife or his Talmidim, different versions of the story, when somebody asked him, why are you giving him so much money? He said, I'm giving him money for meat. Because if he's asking if he can use milk for the 4 cups, obviously this person does not have enough money for meat. Obviously this person cannot afford meat. Otherwise he wouldn't even be asking this question. And that's exactly how a posik looks at a situation. It's not just A or B, milk or not milk. The question is, why is this person even asking such a question? What kind of circumstances would cause somebody to ask if you can use milk for the 4 cups? It must be the person does not have enough money for meat. How else would they be eating their suda? Correct. And that's how a posik looks at the question. It's exactly my point. He looks at the question, looks at the questioner, sees what's going on before giving a final psak. So as I've given this example before in another context, but it's worth repeating. A number of years ago, when I guess you can say when Crocs were first invented, if the development of Crocs, the shoes, can be called an invention worth mentioning. When Crocs were invented, somebody asked Rav Elyashiv, Zeichet Tzaddik Levracha, if he could wear Crocs on Tisha B'Av. Right, on Tisha B'Av we're not allowed to wear leather shoes, and so he asked if he can wear Crocs instead of whatever else he was going to wear. And for whatever reason, and I don't know the reason, Rav Elyashiv told this particular person, no, you can't wear Crocs. I don't know why. Maybe he asked them if they're very comfortable. Maybe the comfort, and maybe this person was crazy enough to think that Crocs are comfortable, and so he said yes. And I don't know the whole situation. Maybe he said maybe they were more expensive in Israel at the time. I don't know. The fancy shoe, right? Because they have holes in them, right? So so he told this person no. What this person did afterwards, I don't know if it was this person or somebody else. This person advertised all over the Jewish world. It was in all the major Jewish newspapers, headline news. Rav Elyashiv says Crocs are not allowed for Tisha B'Av. Okay, and he got calls from all kinds of poskim asking him why he said that, and he said, I didn't poskim like that. I didn't write that down anywhere. I just told the particular person for that particular person's situation that Crocs are not allowed for him, not for anyone else, not as a general rule or anything like that. That's a very, very important thing to remember. That's not the only time such a thing has been done in the Jewish world, especially now. One of the many downsides of social media is that with Jewish Twitter and Facebook and things like that, very often something that a rabbi says is taken out of context and then is made into a halacha, and then the rabbi or the rabbi's followers have to defend what the person said when it's not really what actually happened.
I mean, that's also with like tzedakah. I don't know, and like B'nai Brak with like Reb Chaim Kanievsky. It's always like thank God it's really beautiful, or I don't know, like all these random tzedakah organizations, like Reb Chaim will daven for you, or I don't know.
Reb Chaim Kanievsky put money into our pushka. We're good. Did he know it was
right? It was just like probably passed to him for a second.
Yeah, probably, and he probably gets tzedakah, puts in a lot of pushkas.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. That is that kind of is not fair.
But that's good though. I mean, I don't know, like it's more motivating for people to donate, but Do you really know where he's like these pushes
If
are going?
if Rav if Rav Chaim Kanievsky Shlita says to do such a thing, says to give money to a particular charity, and yes, you can listen to him and give money to that charity. If only the charity is saying that with a picture of Rav Kanievsky shaking hands with one of the rabbis who's the administrator or whatever, I'm not sure that that means that it's a kosher charity. It means that maybe that person is a good person, and that charity might be a kosher charity, but that doesn't mean Rav Kanievsky is giving his haskama to it, right? Him putting money in a pushka doesn't mean that he says that that's a good charity.
Right.
It might have said something completely different on the pushka that he's putting money in. Anyway, I don't know. I don't think this. I think it's good that the Jewish people have so much faith in their gedolim. I wish that continues to be true. It's very important that is how Judaism has survived, is with the strength of the gesund of people like Rav Chaim Kanievsky should live and be well. But there's a downside in that people have to also think, right? Uh, you know, we all have the mitzvah of tzedakah, and there are ways that we're supposed to keep it, and there's a whole list. There's a flow chart of how you're supposed to divvy out your tzedakah, who you're supposed to give to, and there are priorities. And I'm not saying this tzedakah that you're referring to is not the priority, but it might not be for some of us. Rav Chaim did not paskin for everybody that everybody has to give money to that charity, and that's unless he said so, unless you have it in writing that he said so. Right? That's an important thing. All right, let's continue. We do have a couple more ideas I'd like to share with you. Only one idea, unfortunately, this year from Metzora, although we already had at least a third of the flow chart was on the houses, which is also in Metzora. But let's talk about clothing, shall we? So after the issue of skin and tzaraat affecting a person on their skin, the next kind of tzaraat that's mentioned is the kind that affects clothing. So the pasuk says, "V'beged ki yevonega tzaraat b'veged semer or b'veged pishtim." So it doesn't matter if you've got wool clothing or linen clothing, you can have tzaraat in any of those kinds of materials, or really any material at all. It could be just one strand or whatever. And again, it's a green or red marking on the clothing that is definitely going to be unusual. And this Sforno, who by the way is famous for very, very short, sometimes not very clear comments, goes on. This is probably the longest Sforno in all of the Torah. He has quite a long comment here, going through the details of tzaraat, answering a very, very fundamental question that I sort of zigzagged around earlier. And the question is, was tzaraat a natural occurring disease? By the way, there are differences of opinion on this, including there are opinions. I know we often say, tzaraat wasn't actually leprosy, etc. There are opinions that it was indeed leprosy. Leprosy was what tzaraat is. It kind of, the way it's described in the Torah, definitely seems very leprosy-ish. So it is possible that it was indeed leprosy. But that's not the opinion of the Sforno, as he makes it very clear. Mamash ein safek shlo yezeh beteva mishum panim. There's no doubt that there's nothing in nature like this at all, he says. No way can tzaraat be natural. It's definitely a physical affliction that's caused by only spiritual means. Why? Ki veveged lo yikru el b'marot hamishonot im lo mitzad malachat mimam bo mitzvoim shonim bekavana or shelo bekavana v'zeh mitzad eze chet sheyikra b'simanim hatzovim o melachet uman o b'niflot habeged hatzavua. In other words, somebody who colors clothing. One moment. Somebody who colors clothing. A dyer, right? The work of a dyer using various colors by some error which happened when the color dyes intentionally or unintentionally, or the dyer or the dyer's performance, or the chemical reaction to color to garment being colored. Those are the only ways. Those are the only ways that a color of a clothing can change. Again, somebody trying to change it, some sort of mistake, or there's some sort of chemical reaction that causes the color in the clothing to change. Any other color changing of clothing is not natural. We have a tradition, he goes on to say, that the laws of the begadim, of the negaim that go on a beged, the different colors that happen on the clothing, do not apply except to white uncolored clothing. So we're not talking about that this is something that was maybe colored and now it's getting maybe over time it's wearing away, just like everybody likes to buy their sweatshirts and jeans to look like they're faded already. So we're not talking about clothing that's faded. All right, we're talking about clothing that's white. This is white clothing, and it turns red or green. That's not normal. That's not natural. Right? It goes on to say the Torah is saying that at times this amazing thing will occur in garment and clothing and in houses. Why? To awaken up. Remember, he says literally to open the ear, right, of people to their sins, to their transgressions, as because we want Hashem. One moment. Because
That same guy again?
because Hashem does not want anybody to be punished. Yeah? Hashem doesn't want punishment. He warns us about our bad behavior so that we can fix it so that we won't be punished. That's a constant. By the way, there's at least a dozen times I think the Sforno says that in various commentaries in the Torah. That is a common theme for the Sforno, is that Hashem doesn't want to punish anybody, doesn't want to kill, doesn't want to hurt. So these things that he does, these negaim, these discolorations, are meant to awaken somebody. Wake up! Whoa! My white shirt just turned red. My white shirt just turned green. Oh no! I have to fix what I'm doing. I have to change my behavior. That's the idea. Also, it says later on that the Gemara learns out in the Mishnah in Negaim, chapter 11, Mishnah 1, that only the clothing of Jewish people can get these Negaim. That means it's impossible for a Gentile's clothing to be afflicted like this. Now, aside from the reasons for that, why is it that a Gentile doesn't get it? The Sforno goes into it. Just that very fact should tell you something. It's not a natural occurrence. Because if my clothing can become, I don't know, mossy or whatever you want to call it, and I'm hanging out with Pierre or whichever other whichever other non-Jewish name you can think of, I'm hanging out with this person. This person's clothing should be able to get sick too. If my clothing has a pandemic, then anybody's clothing can get the pandemic. If only Jews can get it, that means it's not a pandemic. It's not an illness. It's not a disease. It's not a disease at all. It's something very spiritual. Sorry?
Non-Jews couldn't get it at all. Wasn't there like a woman who was cursed by the
Oh, slow down. I didn't say that. I said non-Jews cannot get it on their clothing.
Oh, sorry.
Right? So different levels. So can a non-Jew get tzaraat? So it's an interesting argument because it's called tzaraat in the Gemara and such when certain people have it, or even non-Jewish kings who get it. And what I think the Ramban says there is that it's not tzaraat there, our disease, it's tzaraat, leprosy. It's actual leprosy, and that they have. It seems like I'm going out on a limb here. I couldn't find this inside anywhere, but it definitely seems like tzaraat is not leprosy, but easy to confuse for leprosy. Just like COVID-19 could be confused for the flu, right? I mean, then it has its other whatever physical issues. Okay, but that's neither here nor thither. The point here is that it's very clear from this Forno that the clothing of a Jew, not a non-Jew, the discoloration only in a white shirt, not some sort of fading in some other color. All of this points to the fact that this is not a normal, natural thing. If my shirt turns red or green, first thing I would do is try to see if there's any red or green dye that I've been leaning against anytime recently. It's not a normal color for a white shirt to turn. It's not good. Right. Also, the idea of the house. Obviously, a house can't just start changing color. Now, you can say, as many quote-unquote scholars said, perhaps it's some sort of moss growing on the walls. And yeah, you could say maybe that's a natural thing and that would happen. Maybe moss grows on walls of people who deserve to be punished. I don't know. But certainly, here's the thing. If it's moss and I take out the bricks that have moss on them and replace them with brand new bricks, and then the moss appears on those brand new bricks, something's going on. It's not just a natural occurrence of some sort of species of bacteria. This is something unique, definitely spiritual, and definitely meant to teach us some sort of lesson, as I state in Forna. So you have the source here also if you're interested in reading about his reasons about why it's true for Jewish clothing, not non-Jewish clothing. And we have time now for one more idea, I hope. Oh no, let's see if we can squeeze in another idea on that pasuk. The Alshech in Tsurat Moshe points out that the pasuk said, it said, let's go back to the pasuk. That's not that pasuk. Sorry, just kidding. So it says in a later pasuk in 14:2, Dalet pasuk bet. It says over there that the tzaraat comes off min hatzarua, from the tzarua. Says the Alshech, why does it have to say from the tzarua, from the person who had tzaraat? Because it's not a medicine that the kohen is giving the person that's taking the tzaraat out. Like the Sforno said, it's a lesson that tzarua is learning that's getting that tzaraat off of the person. the person, the man or woman with tzaraat, and yes, women got tzaraat as well. The man or woman with tzaraat had to recognize their sin, had to do tshuva, and only then would the tzaraat go away. And we said, is it lashon hara? Is it greediness? Is it haughtiness? Whatever it is that causes the tzaraat to begin with, the person has to do teshuva, and then the tzaraat can go away. That's why it says min hatzarua, not just that it left from that tzarua, because that tzarua is the issue, not the medicine that the kohen gives or whatever, not the fixing the bricks, nothing. That's not what fixes tzaraat. It's from the tzarua that the tzaraat gets fixed. The person has to change him or herself. Okay, last pasuk and a few ideas on it. This is towards the end of Metzora, talking about the ceremony that the tzarua had to go through to become a Metzora, to be somebody who no longer has tzaraat. From this, they have to take two pure birds, chayot horot, the erez, some cedar wood, shni, that's crimson, talat, the ezov, hyssop, and this would be brought for the person to become pure. So I don't have the Rashi here, but you'll have to take my word for it. Rashi goes into the symbolism of all of these things. One of the things was that the cedar, the erez, was brought because the person thought too highly of him or herself. Right? I'm a tall, beautiful cedar tree. I don't need to care about other people. I'm more important. I'll keep my money for myself. Well, if that's your attitude, if that's how you feel, well, then you need to be humbled. You need to realize that we're here in this world to serve for others. So that's what Rashi says. The Chidushei Harim quotes that Rashi, and he asks the question. It's quite an interesting question. He says, it's true that the cedar tree symbolizes this lack of humility, but then there's other things. What are these other things that we say that he brings? It says he brings, right? There are three major objects, right? So Rashi said that the erez, the cedar tree, was for the pridefulness, and the Metzora should humble himself to become low as a lowly worm, like a tolat, literally means worm, and as meek as the hyssop, as meek as that shni, the tolat. Okay, and so how can we understand this? This doesn't seem it doesn't seem to make sense. So are we supposed to? I'm giving the sacrifice. Am I supposed to think of myself as a cedar tree or a worm? Make up your mind. So the Chidushei Harim says the person needs to do teshuva for both. Now there's teshuva for the fact that they were humble, and that they weren't humble enough, and the tolat because they were sometimes too humble, or a false humility, pride when you're supposed to be prideful when you need it. To be more specific, the Tam V'dat quotes this idea as well. Tam V'dat says you have to have pride in being a servant of Hashem. When you're doing the right thing, when you're doing the mitzvot, you have to have a certain pride. You can't just be, I'm not really doing anything. It's just me. It's me. No, you should be happy. I am a servant of Hashem. I am the king's servant. You need to carry yourself that way. That's one of the reasons for tzniut. That's one of the reasons for beautifying a shul, or many of the other mitzvot we have. Is this idea that you're not supposed to always be meek. You need to stand up for the right things. If you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything, like the country song says. Of course, two country songs there. That's the idea. I guess as it happens during Sphera, you start to miss music. Uh, um, so that's the idea, and it's actually a very fitting conclusion to today's class because tonight is Yom Ha'atzmaut, and we should take pride in the fact that that we have a homeland, and that there are people who sacrifice their lives on a regular basis. As I mentioned this morning, as Yom HaZikaron, I mentioned in Shul, the body count of Israeli soldiers who died in combat in the last 73 years is almost 24,000. I don't think it's a coincidence. 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva that we mourned during Sphera as well. There's 24,000 soldiers that have perished in these 73 years. It's a very sad thing, but we should take pride in the fact that they didn't die for nothing. They died for something very important, and we need to take Eretz Israel back, and we need to build it so Mashiach can come, and we'll have then, God willing, no more death, no more illness. Arina Bat Elena will have Refuah Shalema, along with all the other Chole Amo Beit Israel.
Amen. Wait, sorry,
Amen.
question.
I have a question.
Okay.